Sonic Drift 2. It's overall pretty underrated. I've already made a video on Sonic Drift 2 because I believe that while it might not be the most objectively good Sonic game out there, I do think it's a game worth playing as it has a lot more content than one can see from the outside. So, to make the second and most likely last video on this game, I'll make a full guide on how to play the game as well as possible, according to everything I know. Without further ado, let's begin. Now, Sonic Drift 2 is a game that came out all the way back in 1996, so playing it on actual hardware not only is very hard, but it isn't really worth it. I'm not sure if I can entirely straight up give the link to how I play the game, but what I'm sure I can say is that it's online, very easy to find, and it's arguably better than emulation with every Genesis emulator like Keka Fusion, because the game never runs at a good FPS compared to online, and the game config settings are pretty odd. So the online route is definitely the best way to play the game. Once you've gotten the game all loaded up, the main buttons you'll want to focus on pressing are the Z, X, Enter, and all the arrow keys, as those are all the buttons you use to play the game. To navigate your way through the menus, use the up and down keys to move the player head, Z key to choose the option, and the X key to go back. I would recommend not immediately going to the race and first go to options, and leave the difficulty setting on normal and the enemy setting on off. This doesn't take away the CPUs, but removes the stage hazards that can appear on the track. For someone who's a beginner, I would recommend turning this off, as it can make learning tracks and proper driving kind of difficult, especially in the later and harder tracks. After configuring your settings, you still shouldn't go to the Chaos GP option, and instead head to free run, and once there, don't change anything, just press run. This will have you play as Sonic as the first track in the game without any CPUs. Press and hold Z to accelerate, and while you're holding Z, use the right and left arrow keys to move the corresponding direction, and use X to drift while using either the right or left arrow key when you're taking a turn. This isn't always necessary, and there are some cases where if your character has high handling, you don't need to drift, which we'll get into later, but as a basis, you should always drift on a corner. Don't hold the X key for too long though, as your handling stat determines how long you can actually drift before you spin out and lose all your speed. You'll notice that there are many different items on the track, so we'll briefly cover each of them. Rings are usually scattered throughout the racetrack. When driving into one, it adds one ring to your ring count. Rings are important because when you have 2 or 3 rings, pressing the up button on your keyboard will make your character use your special ability, which we'll also get into later. But one thing I would like to mention about rings is that rings do not respawn after you collect them. Aside from rings, there are also items on the track you can pick up. When you press up on the D-pad, you use that ability. When you also have rings in your storage, the power-up takes priority over it, so you'll always use your power-up before you use your special ability. There are 7 different power-ups you can receive in the game, starting with the dash ability. This ability allows the player to reach a top speed of 112 for 2.5 seconds. The second ability is the jump ability, which allows the player to jump up, dodging enemy hazards, and when used in the right moment, can negate the need to drift, which can come in handy on some really hard turns. Next, we have the mine ability. This throws a projectile ahead of yourself when you're in 4th, 3rd, or 2nd, and behind you if you're in 1st. If any enemy hits that projectile, they will spin out, akin to if they drifted for too long, and will come to a complete stop. Do be warned that if you're playing a track that loops around, those mines you threw will not despawn, and if you run over them, you will get hit. So if you throw the mine and it misses, make sure to remember where you threw it. The last of the collectible power-ups is the invincible ability, which allows the user to go invincible to all stage hazards for 7.5 seconds, and this can be useful to defend yourself against mines and other players, and play offensively with hitting other players and backing without much hassle. There are 3 remaining power-ups you cannot pick up and will be used immediately. The first is the spring, which acts like the jump ability but is automatic and longer. Sometimes these are obligatory, but even when not, I would recommend hitting them, except in situations where you are clearly not supposed to hit it. The second one is the flash ability, which in the free run game mode doesn't do anything, but in multiplayer when hitting it, it acts similar to how a shock does in Mario Kart, where the screen flashes white and all the players are halted. We'll get more into this item when we cover item strategy and CPUs. The last power up isn't a good one, which is the reverse power up. When hit, the player's input gets flipped around for about a second. If you aren't ready for this can easily send you into the off-road, When you hit this, it's important to know if you did. Hold the opposite of where you want to go, or stay straight for as long as possible so that the effect is negated. And for all the holdable power-ups, you can only carry one at a time. The Chaos JP is a set of 6 races, played with 1 player and against 3 CPUs. You can choose your opponents, or you can have the game choose by yourself by choosing the automatic option. You automatically start in 4th place in the first race of any GP, and every time a race concludes, 1st place gets a Chaos Emerald and 3 points, 2nd place gets 2 points, 3rd place gets 1 point, and etc. When the next race starts, the position you finished the last race with will determine the one you start in the current one. The last thing I should mention in this section of the guide is the user interface of the race, as it's not immediately obvious why there are so many things on screen. From top to bottom, the top half shows the map of the entire track, the top left icon shows which player you're playing as, and the top right icon shows who's currently in 1st place. If the player is in 1st place, it instead shows who's in 2nd. The middle left shows your ring count, the middle right shows your current position, and the bottom right shows your percentage of speed, 0% being completely stationary, and 100% is the base top speed. There are 18 tracks in Sonic Drift 2, and they come in 2 main types. The looping ones, which have the track loop around itself 3 times and you race back to the starting line. Examples of a looping track are Emerald Hill 1 and Casino Night. And the second type of tracks are the one-time ones, where you race to the end of a long track and don't loop. Examples of one-time tracks are Hilltop 1 and Desert Hill 2. There are also 2 types of off-roads in the game as well, and the first one is the grounded off-road, where you slow down when on them and lose speed and acceleration. Examples of grounded off-road are Iron Ruin and Mystic Cave. And the second kind is the non-grounded off-road, which is a lot less forgiving, where getting into the off-road will have you fall off the track and have a machine carry you up slowly, placing you on the track and getting you instantly to 100% speed. Examples of non-grounded tracks are Dark Valley and Milky Way. To start off the more advanced aspects of the game, we should talk about stats. In Sonic Drift 2, each of the 7 characters have stats based on 3 attributes: speed, acceleration, and handling. Your speed stat determines how fast you are at your top speed. Your acceleration stat determines how fast you can accelerate from any percentage to their top speed. And your handling stat determines how much you get dragged by a turn when drifting, and how fast you can move across the track when holding left or right. This is one of the 2 main things to consider when choosing a character. To give a quick rundown, Sonic has high speed and acceleration but low handling, Tails and Knuckles have medium speed, acceleration, and handling, Amy has high speed, low acceleration, and medium handling, Eggman has low speed, decent acceleration, and very high handling, Fang has high speed and acceleration but low handling, and Metal Sonic has very high speed and acceleration but very low handling. I will say that I'm not completely sure on whether decent is better than medium, since there's no mentioning of ranks in the wiki or the official guidebook. In terms of importance, handling is by far the least important stat, because not only will you barely notice it at any point between being an absolute beginner and a professional, but if you play as one character long enough, you'll just get used to the character's handling and it'll be basically negated. Add that to the fact by spamming the X button at a moderate pace when drifting, you can completely negate handling. It's almost never a stat to consider. So, speed and acceleration are the main things to look at, and with Metal Sonic having the highest speed and acceleration stat, it seems pretty obvious that he'd be the meta pick. But stats are one of the 2 things you must consider when choosing a character. The second thing to consider is the driving style of the character. I went into a lot more detail explaining what driving styles are and which one is the best in this video, which I'll link in the description. But briefly, Sonic and Metal Sonic have the speed driving style, Tails and Knuckles have the fly driving style, and Amy, Eggman, and Fang have the fight driving style. The speed driving style requires 2 rings for Sonic to use, and acts like a dash ability, giving him a 112% speed cap for 2.5 seconds. The exception here is Metal Sonic, who's the only character who requires 3 rings to use, and gives him an 118% speed cap for the same amount of time. The fly driving style requires 2 rings to activate, and acts like the jump ability, allowing 1 jump. negating drifting on turns and dodging any opponent hazards. The exception here is Knuckles, who has a secondary move which allows him to punch anyone near him when he activates his special ability. An interesting thing about the fly driving style is that when you get hit, if you use your special ability right afterwards, it makes it so that you accelerate back to 100% instantly. And the last type are the fight characters. All require 2 rings for using, and it acts like the Mind ability, stopping opponents and yourself if you run into it. The exception is Amy, where instead of just stopping all speed and spinning out, anybody who gets hit by the attack goes down to 50% speed for 3.5 seconds. In the video, I explained that fight characters are the best because they stop the CPU's rubber banding and are really fun to play, coupled with the fact that the fight characters can even withstand the hard difficulty. So with that being said, which character has the best driving style and the second best stats in the game, competing with Sonic? It's Fang, who has high speed and acceleration, and I think he's the optimal character in the game. Though I don't think that should define how you play all the time. Each one of them has their advantages and disadvantages, so play as who you like. With that out of the way, we need to talk about how we use our items, because how you use them can determine a race. The best power-up to get overall is the Mind ability, so you should always prioritize getting that. If there's an opportunity to chain any other holdable item for the Mind ability, you take it. For example, at the beginning of Hilltop 1, the game will present you with either a dash or a mine, and you should always choose the mine over dash. Another thing to remember when using the mine ability is to never use it in first. Despite the ability to do it, it never actually works. To truly test this, I collected 11 rings in Quake Cave and laid them all over a completely linear closed-in area and waited for the CPUs to catch up. And they did without slowing down or getting hit at all. One of the many things the CPU can do is steal item boxes. For items like the jump ability, you shouldn't go super far out of your way to try and get it, but if you're in 3rd or 4th, it's a close pack, and you know you're coming up on an item set, you might need that mine or dash ability to win the race. So, slow down. No joke, the only time that CPUs can steal power-ups is when you see them do it. So as long as you're far enough, you can slow down a bit and the CPUs won't take it and you can. The type of track also majorly affects item usage and strategy. A great example of this is with the mine ability we discussed earlier. In Hilltop 1, a while after the mine ability, there's another mine ability to pick up. In this scenario, you already have a mine ability stored and you have a comfortable lead against the other racers. The correct thing to do here is that there isn't a correct thing to do here. Because Hilltop 1 is a one-time track, you're never going to see that power up again. So if you chain and throw it, nothing happens, but if you don't, nothing happens. Another great example of how a one-time versus a looping track matters is in the flash ability. For example, in Dark Valley, you should always go for the flash ability when you see it, since it's the only one in the track. But in Casino Night, the flash should always be collected at lab 3. If you're approaching and a CPU is ahead of you, slow down. If you're ahead, speed up as much as possible so that the item can leave your screen and the CPUs can't collect it. And one last thing, knowing the layout or at least item placement of tracks are crucial. For example, the flash item in Balloon Park is in a very hard to reach spot, but if you know where it is, you know it's worth collecting on lap 3 despite the speed loss. CPUs are possibly the most confusing aspect in Sonic Drift 2. There are some things you think the CPU can do, but it can't, yet it acts like it does. Let's go over some features and things you should know about CPUs in this game. To start off, CPUs are cheaters. And I don't mean it in the fact that the rubber banding can be unfair, or that the attacks seem to always hit even in areas where they shouldn't. No, I mean CPUs cheat in the fact that they literally break the rules the game has established, in that they are able to use their special ability without collecting any rings. You can easily prove this at the beginning of Emerald Hill 1, where any fight type character will drop a projectile before rings even appear on the track. To counter this, CPUs just don't collect rings on the track. Another odd thing about the CPUs is that despite the CPUs being able to take and use all 7 power-ups, the only ones they actually interact with are the invincible ability, jump ability, and dash ability. With the rubber banding I've been saying throughout this guide, it's pretty common to wonder, how do we stop this? How do we make it so that anybody who wants to pass you will almost always regret it? Backing is the most common way to stop an opponent from passing you. Backing is only really effective when either in second or first place. You'll want to line yourself up where the CPU will pass you, and when they do, they'll hit your back and spin out. But it's almost impossible to find out where the CPU will pass you when in first. So how do we know where to stay when we want to back second? Well, when you pass first and get into first, make sure to stay where you passed them, and stay there for as long as optimally possible. Eventually, the CPU will try to pass you through that same route, and it'll have them spin out. Afterwards, the CPU will choose a new location to pass you, and you can't back them again unless by pure luck. But the dash ability and or special ability as a speed driving style will have you pass them and repeat the process. Beware that backing doesn't always work. You'll know that backing won't work if the CPU starts getting a bit too much up your sprite, and in that case, you'll want to move out the way immediately, as if you don't move, you'll be the one who gets hit and spin out instead. The mine ability is possibly the most tactical way to have an opponent spin out, and everything said here also applies to playing as fight characters. When you have the mine ability, you'll want to line yourself up with your target. You want to throw it, not when the opponent is too close nor too far. For example, if the CPU is right ahead of you, don't throw, as the CPU will dodge it and you'll likely get hit instead. But when the CPU isn't in your vision, you'll also not want to throw it, as you'll miss because the CPU is too far ahead. The middle ground where your throw will hit is where the sprite of the CPU is anywhere from a size bigger to 3 sizes bigger than the smallest visible sprite. It sounds really specific, but timing it is really easy when you get used to it. Once you're done throwing though, you always need to make sure that you move out of the way, because the CPU that is spinning out can still back you. It's also easier to hit this shot when on a straight line, because curves can screw your view of where your target can be and can mess with how to avoid them after they spin out. So unless necessary, you'll want to hit them on a straight line. And the last non-special ability attached way to spin out a CPU is by using the invincible ability. You can use it when you know a CPU will try to pass you, or by aligning yourself with them when you want to pass them. Instead of spinning out, you'll go straight through them, and they'll automatically get backed. And to end this guide off, here are some extra things you should know when playing that don't really fit into a topic. When playing against Knuckles, don't stay near him as you're trying to pass him. This is because the CPU will always have Knuckles instead punch you without showing his animation, and this will continue to happen every time. So, always try to be on the opposite side of him before passing him, as his special ability can't be used when behind someone, allowing you to back him. When you have a dash or invincible ability stored, and there's a mandatory spring ahead, you shouldn't use your ability until after the spring, since using the item first will shorten its usage, since the spring cancels out those abilities completely. If you're on lap 3, have more than 2 rings as a fight character, or have a mine ability, about to get about 80% of your way to the end, and the CPU just got hit a bit after the halfway point of the lap, you might want to consider slowing down and purposefully letting the CPU catch up. Now, this is a really dangerous game, because if the CPU is quick enough, you won't be able to get within mine throwing range, but it's better than trudging forward and the possibility that the CPU will pass you at the very end, and not being able to do anything about it. When taking drifts in the game, instead of holding X to drift, tap X every so often. This aligns your cart with the curves, making you lose less speed. When playing as a fly character, you should always have at the very least 4 rings on you, so that when you get hit, you have enough rings left to use your special ability. Anytime you reset the game, i.e. winning a GP or just resetting, or go back into the difficulty option, the game automatically resets the settings back to normal and stage hazards being on, so make sure to always change that. And that's all I can give as a guide in Sonic Drift 2. It's actually a really fun experience, and really replayable when playing casually. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to check out my other videos and subscribe, and have a good day or night wherever you are.